Look at an animal in a zoo and an animal in the wild. Monkeys in the zoo get diabetes. They get heart disease. They're eating our crappy food stuff. Look at cats and dogs. Cats and dogs get cancer. They get all the stuff that we get. We feed them a crappy processed diet. An animal like that in the wild does not get cancer. They just don't. I really think that a lot of the symptoms, this chronic civilization things that we don't find in the wild, they're not genetic. They're environmental.
All right. Well, it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Elena Gross on the show today. Welcome.
Zora, thank you so much for having me. It's been on the agenda for a while.
Yes, I know. Yeah, you're right. We've been on and off and on and off. But I was prompted by one of the women in my community who absolutely adores you. And she says you've helped her with her migraines so much. And I have to get you on the show. And I listened to my community, listened to my members, and I started to look into you and what you do. And I was blown away. And I thought this is really good information. And although I don't have migraines myself, I get a lot of women complaining about them and I want to help them. So this is why you're here. So thank you so much for spending your time with me.
That makes me so happy to hear. That's why I do the things I do, because I want to help people. And I guess that's the same for you. Thank you so much for giving me a platform to spread the news even further so we can help other patients get their brains back.
Yes, I've lived with chronic pain in my hips because I've had osteoarthritis and then eventually I had hip replacements. And I know what it's like to live with chronic pain. It sucks, but it's a very different pain, I think, when it's in your brain or in your teeth. They say tooth pain is also really horrible, but it's this constant squeezing in your head. I can only imagine. I don't know what it is to migraine. I know what a headache is like, but migraines are different. And I think we need to make that distinction. So can you tell us exactly what is a migraine and how does it differ from a regular headache?
Yeah, so a migraine is much more than just a normal bad headache. It's actually a complex neurological, and we'll learn probably neurometabolic disease. And while a regular headache might cause tension and you can walk or you can drink water to make it better, right? Or you can go to sleep. A migraine is so bad that it typically wakes you up. If you walk, it makes it worse. It's a multi-phase brain event, one can call it, that involves neuroexcitability, brain chemistry, but also neuroenergetics, so metabolism, or how the brain uses energy. And it usually comes with a constellation of symptoms that go beyond head pain, but just the pain itself is also usually moderate to really severe, throbbing, and typically one-sided. So whereas tension headache could be on your forehead, could be in your neck or the back of your head, it's typically both-sided. Migraine typically is one-sided, but it can happen two-sided as well in some cases. And it comes with symptoms beyond the pain, such as nausea, vomiting, sensitivity to light, sound, and smell. So we have these osmophobia, photophobia, and so on, and visual disturbances in a third of patients. That's this aura phase, which happens 30 to 60 minutes before the headache phase, where you get blackening of the visual field, zigzag lines, or really visual disturbances or sensory disturbances. This can get all the way to like paralysis of half of the body, struggling for words, not being able to speak. And we can get into why this aura phase happens later if you want. So migraine is really more than a headache. And in contrast to a normal headache, you will wake up from sleeping, right? And there's no way that you can walk. Walking makes it worse. You really have to lie down into a dark room, and life halts when you have those attacks and they're more severe. Now, what's happening beneath the surface, this is more like a cluster of symptoms. And that's what typically in modern medicine, right, we become more and more compartmentalized, become more and more specialized. So people look for certain clusters of symptoms that are then called a disease. But what I want to do or try to do, and I guess you as well, is look into why are these things happening? And with my own personal story, nobody could tell me for a very long time, why are migraines actually happening? And where I see when you ask about what is a migraine, what I think is super essential for people to understand is that migraine is actually a messenger. Pain is a messenger, not a mistake. Now, if we look at how many people in the world have migraine and the underlying migraine genetics, it's 1 billion people. Now, 1 billion people carry the genetics. Every 7th person on this earth carries migraine genetics, maybe even more. So that cannot have been a mistake of evolution. These genes would not have spread if they wouldn't have had an evolutionary advantage.
Why would you want to have the genes for this?
Exactly. How is that an evolutionary advantage? Why would you have migraine genetics? And there it's important to understand that genes are the bullets in the gun, but the environment is the trigger. Now, whether and how genetics are expressing depends on what environment they're born into. Now, with migraine, my evolutionary advantage theory is pain is a warning signal. Now, what is it warning us about? Why do migraine patients have pain? And this is where I also disagree with the modern, let's say modern medicine approach or theory of migraine. They think it's a disease of malfunctioning pain signaling. They have said basically, when you have chronic pain loses its warning function. It's basically a pain signaling without a reason. And maybe we look at this with an analogy. So imagine you're sleeping in your bed and the fire alarm goes off. Now, the fire alarm is super annoying, right? It almost hurts. You cannot sleep. Now, first instant might be we turn off the fire alarm. The fire alarm is the migraine. Now, yes, the fire alarm is annoying. The migraine pain is super annoying, painful, terrible, right? But it is warning us. Now, we cannot just turn off the fire alarm and keep the fire, the cause, in the building going, right? So we need to extinguish the fire. And I think we need to go even one step further. Now, we might extinguish the fire. The fire is the inflammation, the increased oxidative stress, the energy deficit that turns on this fire alarm, that leads the body, and this is where the evolutionary advantage comes in, right? If there's a fire burning in the body needs to tell us something's wrong. Now, migraine is telling us that there is a fire in the body, that there are things that are so wrong that it could be detrimental to our survival. That's the fire alarm in the building. Our house is burning down. We are in danger. Now, you might know, okay, there's a fire. We might want to extinguish the fire. But let's imagine now, again, looking at modern medicine, that the fire is burning because our phone is broken or some electricity in the house is fusing and it's leading to a fire because that's broken. Now, the next step, and this is where I am at, or what I'm trying to do, is not just extinguishing the fire, but looking at the root cause for the fire. Why was the fire coming on? Now, modern medicine for migraine, the modern treatment is we're turning off the fire alarm. Now, we are giving painkillers, we're giving triptans, we're giving something that turns off the pain. The pain is the fire, the signal, right? The messenger. Now, if you get a better medical doctor who has some time, they might want to they might do labs and see, oh, there's a fire. We have inflammation in the body. We have increased oxidative stress. We have an energy crisis. But in order to find out why did the fire burn, it would be crazy to assume that your house is on fire and nobody actually takes the time and the detective work to find out why did the house burn down. Was there somebody lighting it on fire? Was it a thunderstorm? Was it some electrical fuse that is causing the fire? And if we don't want our next house to burn, this is what we have to do. And that's where we come in, really looking at the root cause, not just symptomatic treatment. Now, why is a migraine? What evolutionary advantage is migraine? Well, first, it's a warning signal. Pain is evolutionary preserved. If you have there are people genetically that is an accidental mutation that cannot feel pain, their life expectancy is drastically reduced because they don't have that fire alarm that alarms us that something is off in the body or outside and causing us harm. Now, the second thing is, what are migraine genetics? Now, migraine brains actually, and that comes with their genetic underlying, are actually very hyperexcitable brains. They don't habituate. Habituation is an evolutionary preserved mechanism that, for example, if somebody without migraine, say you, were to look at a white wall that doesn't change, your brain would eventually stop firing because there's nothing changing. You can save energy. A non-migrainous brain will spend on average, say 20% less energy. A migrainous brain will continue to fire. It's hyperexcitable. Now, why would evolution even do that in every seventh person? Why would it spend so much energy in every seventh person in the world? If we go back just 10,000 plus years, our species would lie around a campfire of small tribes, and it would be the migraine person most likely with a hyperexcitable brain that wakes up when the tiger is approaching or there's any threat because their brain is continuously firing. It's continuously ready and hyperexcitable to eventually, hopefully, save the tribe who's sleeping deeply. So in migraine, we have these two phenomena, unfortunately. We have this hyperexcitable brains that are spending a lot of energy, But due to the way and the environment that are now loading the migraine gun, we also have not enough energy availability. So energy, mitochondria, the powerhouse in the cells, the way that the migraine body makes energy is not meeting the demand in today's world. So we have a high energy demand and a limited supply. That together leads to an energy deficiency, increased oxidative stress, inflammation that the body is warning us about. Because what do people with a migraine do? Moving makes it worse. That's energy intensive. Light, sensory stimuli, noise, anything that makes you spend more energy is making it worse. So we have to lie down in a dark room and rest until energy homeostasis in the brain is restored. So it's a very protective mechanism that saves us, forces us to save energy until we have energy in the brain again. So I'm saying migraine is the messenger, not a mistake. It's evolutionary preserved, and we have to fix metabolism to fix the brain.
Okay. All right. I've got a couple of questions just so people understand the differences between a headache. You said with a migraine, it's usually you have some kind of genetics to predispose you, but you've got one-sided, sometimes two. You've got the nausea, vomiting, sensitivity, the aura, the maybe paralysis, you can't sleep. And I imagine everybody has different degrees of this, or some have these and not others, kind of like menopause, right? We don't all have all symptoms, but maybe some do have more than others. What about seizures? There is some connection with people in migraines and seizures.
Absolutely. So seizures and migraine share common genetic backgrounds. In a way, you can think of an aura phase, that phase of sensory disturbances, almost like a mini seizure. So what we have there is we have neurons firing in synchrony, if it's visual, over the back of your cortex. And it's almost like an electrical wave traveling over the cortex. And if that happens over the visual cortex, you can see the wave traveling. And when neurons fire in synchrony, that takes up so much energy, that shifts around so much of the electrical gradient and the electrolytes across the inside and the outside of the cell, that it basically leaves behind destruction, almost like a tsunami. And when these neurons have fired in synchrony and they need to rest, they don't fire at all. And that's where you have this blackening of the visual field, or you have a drastically reduced function. If that travels over the speech system, you can't speak. If it travels over the motor system, or for example, your arm, you can't lift your arm or you can't feel. So this wave of electricity, this firing in synchrony, is also what you get in some form of seizures. So a focal seizure is kind of a neurons firing in synchrony and then you stop function. So this is when people have a seizure attack and they shiver and then they can't move in that sense, right? So they are genetically related. And sometimes you find that somebody who has seizures in childhood, they can grow out and turn into migraines. So there's a genetic overlap for sure.
Do most people who have seizures have migraines?
I think there's an increased risk, but I don't think everybody has migraine. No.
Okay, so there's all these things that differentiate. And one of the big ones are a headache. You can just walk it off, drink some water, go lie down, or it will be fine. It'll go away. But a migraine will wake you up in the middle of the night, have this fire alarm. And
you cannot sleep through it.
A little bit of aspirin don't really work either.
Exactly.
Too intense. How long does a migraine last?
So that's a bit of a difficult question. The medical diagnostics say anywhere between 4 and 72 hours. So that'll be 3 days. It's fairly accurate, but once you have chronic migraine, one can basically transition into the next. So you can literally have migraine every day as well. So chronic migraine is from 15 days a month onwards. So if you have 50% of time you're in pain, out of 8 have like really the migraine criteria, then you have chronic migraine. So this diagnostic kind of is relevant more in episodic migraine, which means you have really attacks that you can identify as one. So say you have up to 72 hours, then you have a break, and then you have the next attack. When I was chronically affected, I could sometimes notice it's the next attack when it was switching sides. So I'd have 72 hours of the right side, and then it would switch basically straight into the left side. So I would know it's a new attack in that sense, but I mean, it's still ongoing. So in chronic migraine, these like attack distinctions on how long does one last versus the next is a bit more blurry.
It sounds really scary, especially if you're experiencing this for the first time and you think you're dying because nothing's working and you're
and especially with the aura, people think they are getting they're getting a seizure or they have a traumatic brain event, or it's just like really scary when you suddenly lose vision. Most people are super scared and they think now, no, they're gonna die or they lose function or they go blind or something. And yeah, also with the pain, it's excruciating pain. For me, they thought I have a brain tumor of some sort, or yeah, it's very scary. And typically you're relieved when you get the migraine diagnostic because at least it's not really, a lot of the things are reversible. There's maybe some small spots in the white matter of the brain, like mini lesions with, especially migraine with aura, which is closer to epilepsy. But typically a lot of this is reversible. Yeah, a stroke, for example, is often not reversible, which is sometimes very similar to the aura phase.
Yeah, people, if you think you're having a stroke, I can imagine the panic. Do you remember the first time you had a migraine?
Absolutely, yeah. So the first times were not maybe the exact same first attack, but I remember when it was, and this is another thing which would be interesting for your listeners. When I was starting to get my periods, it was very irregular, and my gynecologist noticed I have estrogen deficiency. And so what did she do?
How old were you?
14. 14.
14
Yeah,
with estrogen
14.
deficiency.
Yeah, so my hormones were off. I had hypothyroidism that couldn't be treated because I didn't tolerate it. So there was a lot of hormone systems that were kind of off because I've been always a pretty sick child. Now I know it's all mitochondrial dysfunction that I basically had since I was born. My twin died and all of that. But she thought it's the best idea to put me on the pill. So I got the pill when I was 14, which basically completely made me estrogen deficient, right? And contraceptive pill, just so there's no misunderstanding. 14. And half a year later, I get these excruciating headaches. And nobody knew what this was. And I remember waking up and my dad thought I was being a difficult teenager. My parents basically telling me, go lie down, go to bed, stop whining, just go sleep. You have a headache. And I just couldn't. And I remember it was so bad. I didn't know what to do. I was crawling into the bathroom. Nobody was taking me seriously. My mom always did. I have to give her that. But nobody was awake. I was trying to like reach the painkillers on the top of the shelf. I couldn't. I collapsed and I was crying on the bath mat half of the night. And my parents found me. And then eventually we were like, okay, this is not okay. Something is really not okay. And then for a year, we tried to get a diagnostic and they thought I had a tumor, all these brain scans. I was referred to a psychologist. Do you have bad grades? Do you have stress in school? And I was a pretty good, despite all this, I was a pretty good student. So my worst grade was like a B plus or something. So no. And eventually we Googled it, actually. My mom remembered her mom had these crazy headaches, which she as a child thought her mom was being difficult. So then we found out, yeah, it's migraine. And then I thought it's many people and the doctor said, oh, yeah, we can do something about this. No problem. And then I tried everything, alternative approaches, all the medication, the antidepressants, the anticonvulsants. They just gave me dementia. I remember being in my bachelor's degree and I was with my best friend over coffee. I had no idea what her name was. I was losing common names. I would wake up in the morning. I didn't know where I was. And at some point, I literally almost burned down Oxford, the Oxford College, because this was again like the dementia from the Topamax. Insane. I had put potatoes on to boil for lunch. And then I completely forgot that I wanted to do lunch. And I mean, potatoes have a lot of water in them, right?
Yeah.
Forgot that. Then I thought, I'll go for a run. I went for a run and I come back and there's all this black smoke coming out of everywhere. And they have a million fire doors in England, luckily, right? Because it was like the thing was that the kitchen was on fire. I was like, I came in and I was like, oh my God, like that was me. And I had such luck that they were black, like this black that it didn't burn yet. But that was like the wake-up call. I was like, I'm being a danger to people around me, to myself, people around me. This cannot be my life. This was the moment where I was like, this is not a life worth living. I can't do this anymore. I had to to not fail my degree. I had to be on this like strong anti-epileptic drugs. But the side effects were not okay. This was the moment I realized I have to do something about this. This is not this standard medicine, and all the neurologists take me, oh no, we'll just take another drug. It'll be fine. We'll find a solution. Just take this other drug or try this drug. Or I was like, no, this can't be the way. So then I decided I have to devote my life to study this condition better and eventually, hopefully, contribute to a better form of therapy. And this led to the research, led to the first patent, the PhD eventually. And then when no pharma company wanted to bring it to market, my startup. And this is where I am today, a decade later.
Wow.
Talking to you about how to actually help migraine and not just numb the symptoms, but get to the root cause, which is what it's all about.
Oh,
trying to extinguish the fire, not numb the fire alarm, and actually going one step further and trying to find why the fire in the body is burning. And this can be very different to everyone, but it boils down to a common pathway. And the common pathway is energy deficiency in the brain and or too much oxidative stress, which in turn also leads to this energy deficiency.
we're going to talk about, yeah, some of these root causes. And no wonder you wanted to study the brain.
Yeah, exactly. That's
So
why I've been always, even prior migraine, I've always been interested in the arts and the science in a way. I used to draw and I was a bit of analytical and creative. And that's why I started with psychology. It's in between both worlds. And the brain is the organ that makes us who we are. So I always thought it's the most fascinating organ of the body. And there's so much still to discover. We understand the body pretty well, but we have so little understanding of the brain. It's transforming. But then when the chronic migraines hit, I was very lucky that I had gone down that path because I could switch into neuroscience and also get more into the medical side of things. Lucky enough.
it's quite prevalent. You said 1 billion people in the
Yep,
world
1
have
billion.
migraines, and
Hmm.
one out of every seven people
Exactly.
generally have this. And I know people, I'm in the community of menopause, so it seems like everybody's got migraines. But
Hmm.
even before that, I do remember, yeah, you'd run into people who've had migraines and it just sounds horrible. And it's debilitating, if to say the least, and you cannot function, and everything has to come to a grinding halt. It's just not a life. So I'm glad you explored the reasons, but it sounds like you said that this is an alarm system, that the
Hmm.
migraine brain, the genetics of the people who have this are I probably have a certain characteristic as well. And you sound, it's like, it's almost like a blessing. Like the pain is a messenger. This is not a bad thing. I kind of say the same thing about women who get symptoms in menopause. I'm like, it's actually a good thing. I'm worried most about the asymptomatic woman because she will not go look for the fire. She will not get tested. She will not.
Yep.
Why should she? She doesn't feel anything. She feels great, quote unquote. Then she won't get tested. She may then have osteoporosis and be really surprised by the age of 65 and go, where did this come from? So why do some people have this, the alarm system, right? The
Hmm.
migraine brain, and some people could be totally metabolically dysfunctional, inflammation all over the place, and not have this pain. So why do some, I guess it's just boils down to genetics or what?
I think it's genetics and it's always a gene environment interaction, right? So some people may not have that alarm system, which boils down to certain free radicals, so oxidative stress, which are these bombs that kind of destroy everything they react with. Could be our DNA, could be our mitochondria. Now, these are eliciting the release of pro-inflammatory peptides in migraine, very common. CGRP is the pain-causing peptide that then causes the pain and gives us the warning signal. So some people might not have that system as prominent. Some people might be living in a perfect environment where they're very good at excreting toxins. They're very good at making energy, right? Immune because they have very metabolically resilient brains. They might have adapted to sugar metabolism very well, carbohydrates, which are all abundant. We all know these people that have very little sleep. They run around like crazy. They eat garbage all day. And for some reason, they're fully energized. They don't need to nap. They don't need a snack. They eat or they don't eat. They always have energy. They're very slim, even if they do eat carbs, right? Those people are the ones that have really adapted in this blink of an eye of 10,000 years where carbohydrates were very prevalent. We could have people with very resilient mitochondria that make a lot of energy with a lot of antioxidant defense, so very good enzymes that are bomb neutralizers that can catch those free radicals. We might have individuals that are genetically very well equipped to detox chemicals that are all abundant and toxins that are all around, and they're also hitting on our powerhouses of the cells. So I would say somebody who doesn't have, so either they're unlucky, they don't have the warning signal, they don't have this pain signaling very established, so they don't get the warning signal. And that is bad because then they could have the environment, the bad environment, but they just don't have the warning signal very, very loud. Or they really have, they're immune because they really have adapted, they're metabolically resilient. And so they don't actually get into the energy deficiency. So the body doesn't even need to warn them. So that's the two scenarios, I think. So either you don't have the warning signal genetics, or you just have the perfect metabolism, or you have the perfect lifestyle and the perfect environment. So your brain doesn't actually run out of energy, in which case it doesn't have to be warned. So
Yeah,
we do get migraine in late onset, for example, when people do have a trauma, or a stroke and the blood supply, the energy supply to the brain is damaged. Or you have that a lot in the US with NFL players, with football, rugby players. If they get a severe insult to the brain, they can still develop migraine later in life because then probably their energy metabolism is much damaged. So the warning signal is then turned on.
Yeah, I think we all know those people who just get away with doing everything and they live to 100 and they're just smoking, drinking,
Exactly.
partying. And you're like, wow. We always say that genes load the gun and lifestyle environment and pulls the trigger. But sometimes, and then we say that there's some people say 10, some people say 20% is genes that will determine if you get disease or not. And then there's 80 or 90%. I've heard
But it
even
depends
more.
on the trait. And this is just such a generalization where I want to kick in because, for example, take height. Height is 95% genetics. So
Yeah.
if you're starving in Africa, then you might not get your full height potential. But as soon as you have enough protein and calories, how tall you are, how small you are is almost 100% genetics, right? So you can't say it's 20 or 30. Every single trait will have a different gene environment interaction. So we know this from monogenetic twin studies. Some things are almost entirely genetic, like what your eye color will be or your hair color. It's almost 100% genetic, right? How old you are going to be or which disease you're going to get also depends on the genes, right? So take Duchenne muscular dystrophy, for example, is a great example where there's one protein that is malfunctioning and people die before they're 30. It's fatal. It's 100% almost genetic, right? So no matter what environment you put these people into, they will die prematurely because they will not have muscles. So
Yeah.
you take something else like a chronic civilization disease and it's maybe 50-50 or 30-70. So it's very, very individual depending on what trait you're looking at.
I agree. Thank you for explaining that because there are some genes that are just too powerful. Like, I'm sorry, you must have the FOXO3 gene. I don't know. These people are living and they're doing great. Or there's, like you said, eye color and height, like 100% genetic. It's incredible. So, in
So
fact,
maybe just one more thing for the
yeah.
analogy you said, maybe for some people, the gun is just never loaded. So you can pull all the triggers and it's just never going to shoot. So some people might be so lucky that their gun is just not loaded because they have the perfect genes. And it's always a consolation for something complex like aging, right? They
Yeah.
might have all the good aging genes variants. So their gun is never loaded, no matter what
But
environmental triggers you use on them.
we know that that's a small percentage, right?
Yeah,
So
it's a
the
small percentage.
probabilities of you smoking, you're increasing your risk for cancer, for lung cancer. It's clear.
Yeah,
But, there's
absolutely.
some people who get away with it but it's always an outlier. So we always have to look at probabilities. And I think that with people with migraines, they have a very strong alarm. Like this is a serious alarm. People who may go, I don't know, I don't feel anything, who have metabolic dysfunction or inflammation, maybe they're either getting used to it or their alarm isn't as strong. We can
Yeah.
get through until maybe you can't
And
anymore.
who listens to a whisper? Nobody listens
No.
to a whisper, me included. You have all these responsibilities. If you can override the whisper, you will. And I guess also for the migraine patients, for somebody who isn't chronic, your body is whispering the whole time. And
Mhm.
only if you haven't listened and it's really severe now, then it pulls the trigger for the migraine because then you have to listen.
One last question about maybe predispositions to migraines is you mentioned you had lost a sister, a twin,
Yeah.
and that's sort of a traumatic event. And in gerontology, we always look at adverse childhood experiences. They're called ACEs. Does trauma increase the risk of developing migraines later on in life?
I'm sure trauma increases the risk to almost any disease because you have to imagine trauma is a very stressful event and stress increases oxidative stress. And oxidative stress, those free radical bombs, they can be induced via toxins, so chemical stressors, physical stressors, over exercising, or psychological stressors. In a way, you could say the body doesn't really care where the stress is coming from. Psychological stress is as physical as chemical or physical stress, really, on a cellular level. So a traumatic event increases this oxidative stress free radical bombs tremendously. That will hurt your mitochondria. That will hurt your energy production. It will hurt your DNA. it increases inflammation. So whether physical, emotional, or psychological, it really affects the developing nervous system. It sensitizes pain pathways. It can impair mitochondrial function over time. Now, for me, that happened pre-birth. I don't have any recollection of that happening, right? So this might have been more traumatic for my mom, who then really gave me very bad mitochondria later on. So that's all my mom's fault in that sense, right? She also had amalgam fillings, and my mitochondria are really bad. My mom's are bad, mine are really bad, and my grandma's were already bad. So it gets worse and worse with the generations because you have all these insults of your life also being impacting the mitochondria. And it's important to know mitochondria come from your mother only. They don't come from your dad, which is a shame in my case, right? That's why migraine has such a maternal component. So it's typically inherited. It can be inherited to males, but it typically comes from the mother's line, interestingly. And that is also a strong evidence for it to being a energy deficiency, a mitochondrial component to the disease. So in brief, coming back to the question, trauma increases, I think, the development of any brain issue, actually. And that depends on what genetic underpinnings you have, whether you might get depressed, anxious, have migraine, ADHD, maybe even eventually, or Alzheimer's later in life. I think all of these things can be increased by too much oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and that is definitely contributed or triggered also by traumatic experiences.
Did your mother have migraines?
My mother did not, but she has mitochondrial dysfunction. So sometimes these things skip a generation. That's very common. My mom didn't have the migraine, but she does have mitochondrial dysfunction for sure. So,
and did you say your grandmother had
my grandma had migraines very badly.
Like skipped a generation.
It skipped a generation, yeah.
Do you have children?
I do not. And the big question is, can I morally even have children? My mitochondria are bad. I'm doing everything I can, but they might be mutated that I'm not even sure if I can fully recover them. My kids will get my mitochondria. And in today's world, with all the toxins around and everything we do, lifestyle hits our mitochondria in a negative way. The blue light that's emitted, the toxins that comes with our food, us always multitasking, working all the time, not shutting down, psychological stressors, flying, potentially alcohol, the way we eat and live, all of these things negatively impact our mitochondria. Mine already negatively impact. I know my mom wasn't very healthy ever. My grandma wasn't. I'm the worst health-wise, so I'm worried my children might be even worse off. So my big question is it ethically fair that I want to have children and I know that they might be sick and still have children anyway? So that's a very difficult question for me to answer. Also because I cannot control all of their environment. They're going to be at birthday parties and eat all the crap that I know that definitely contributed to my migraines later in life. And the world is just going to get more and more poisoned. Yeah, it's a difficult question to ask. There are things which are very interesting now, and I don't know if I want to go down that path. You can have 3 mothers now. There are ways that you can get a mitochondrial donor. So that basically you take the DNA from the father and the mother, and you put it in the egg of a young mitochondrial healthy mother. So that you have the mitochondria from a healthy young woman and the nuclear DNA from the parents. So basically the child would have three parents in a way. That is already possible. I don't think it's legal in Europe yet. So it's more of a difficult thing to get. It's possible. And I think this is probably where the field is going to go, is we need to start fixing mitochondria and maybe even eventually using viral vectors or something to put healthy mitochondria into cells where mitochondria aren't working well. But that's a bit of a futuristic conversation.
What about gene editing?
Yeah, so the gene editing is a bit of a tricky thing. So there are mitochondrial enzymes and mitochondrial proteins that are encoded in the nuclear DNA, which is the DNA that sits in the nucleus, like the center of our cells. But mitochondria have their own DNA. So mitochondria, this is actually an interesting story. Mitochondria are an example of the first coalition in the world, let's say. So when we go back millions of years now, where the earth was just a soup and some volcanoes, and for the first time, oxygen started to appear in the atmosphere, we had single-celled organisms floating around that ancient soup, and we had bacteria floating in that soup. Now, oxygen appeared, and the bacteria had a problem. Now, with oxygen, there's free radical bombs that they're vulnerable to, right? So the bacteria floating around needed a protection. The single-celled organisms that were floating around in the soup, they needed better energy. So eventually the bacteria and the single-celled organisms fused. Now the bacteria said, I'm going to make you energy if you protect me from the oxidative stress in the atmosphere. And this is the origin of mitochondria. The mitochondria are ancient bacteria that are inside of our cells making energy. They have their own DNA. And even today, we are more mitochondria than we are bacteria or that we are human. Some cells have like 50,000 mitochondria that are very energy hungry. Our eyes, retina, have a lot of mitochondria. Brain cells have a lot of mitochondria. All these tissues and organs that are very energy efficient, need to be very energy efficient, have these ancient bacteria inside of them. So gene therapy would somehow have to try and target the mitochondrial DNA and not the nuclear DNA. And another problem that you might see, right? Everything we do today also with like antibiotics and all of these things will also hurt those very vulnerable ancient bacteria in our cells. So our mitochondria are very exposed. And the problem is with nuclear DNA, we have a lot of repair mechanisms. We have enzymes that if they detect a mistake, they will change it out, right? In the mitochondrial DNA, we don't have repair mechanisms. And the mitochondria are just floating inside of the cell. They're freely moving wherever we need energy. And that means they're not even protected by a nucleus structure or something. If there's like oxidative stress in the cell, they're very vulnerable and exposed. So that's why protecting our mitochondria is probably the number one thing we as modern humans in this today's toxic world need to do. And it's very hard to repair. Mitochondria can regenerate, but they can only regenerate. So the new mitochondria are developed from the best old mitochondria that you have. Now, when they're all mutated, then you're just going to have to make new mitochondria from damaged mitochondria because you just have that blueprint, right? So over time, then you might get worse and worse mitochondria unless you're preserving some good ones. And for many people, they still have some good ones, which is great hope, right? You can get rid of the damaged ones and make new mitochondria from the good ones. But if you're really damaged, that's going to be difficult. So I don't know whether we have like gene scissors for mitochondrial DNA yet, but that might be possible to develop that in the future. And I think that would be amazing. But right now, I think we're just not there yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Because I want people to live migraine free.
And for a lot of people, it's possible. Even take me. I have the worst mitochondria and I don't get migraine anymore because even with my mitochondria, I get them to a level of making and support that I almost don't get migraines anymore. So the baseline support. So it's absolutely possible.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about how to fix this because it all boils down to mitochondrial dysfunction and our crappy lifestyle. So that's contributing more on top of you have the predisposition. But one last question before we go into that, I want to ask about the menopause question because does the research show that migraines tend to worsen or even suddenly appear during that peri or post-menopause transition when our hormones are kind of fluctuating or even declining?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And for this question, it's important to understand that estrogen and female hormones are not just reproductive hormones, right? They're metabolic and neuroprotective hormones. They support mitochondrial function, they stabilize neuronal excitability, they help regulate neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. They really influence how metabolically flexible we are. And they are really protective. In a way, they're our shield. So reproductive hormones, estrogen, progesterone are really our shield, right? So if we have a loss of estrogen, it really unmasks underlying metabolic dysfunction. So the more metabolically inflexible you are, the more insulin resistant, the more inflamed you are, the more you will suffer from fluctuating or declining estrogen levels. Because if you're already broken and now you lose the shield, you will feel it and your body will warn you because you will now run out of energy or you have too much oxidative stress. So this is where migraines hit. Now, if you are very vulnerable to migraine in your menopause or perimenopause is now you have this like wild fluctuation of hormones. That's always bad. That's also why even before menopause, if you go back to childhood, boys and girls have migraine at equal frequency. Now, once puberty hits and hormones start to fluctuate, this is where migraine becomes much more prominent in women, 3-to-1. So you can think of that as males are cruising at a constant speed across the highway with their testosterone and hormones, right? They don't fluctuate. They always have this level of protection. Women's fluctuate even before perimenopause. So then you have migraine frequency tremendously increasing prior to the period when estrogen and progesterone are at the lowest. If they're also metabolically damaged and inflexible, they lose the shield, they get a migraine. Some like clockwork every time. Now in perimenopause, now this fluctuation is even more drastic and erratic, so that can really trigger a lot of migraines. Now in menopause now, the levels become more stable again. So typically a lot of people actually get better. Now here the big problem is now stable at what level? Now, if you're stable at a much too low of a level of estrogen and progesterone, then your brain is still warning you because you need those hormones, right? This is when, and I know we'll talk about that later, possibly HRT can come in very handy because hormones always need to be in an optimal range and fluctuation is bad, but stability at a suboptimal level is bad as well. So this is why this is individual. And what you'll see is somebody who doesn't get worse. It's interesting that menopausal symptoms in ancient cultures is very much almost absent. So you have some ancient tribes that almost get no menopause symptoms at all or perimenopause symptoms. Why? The key differentiator is metabolic resilience. These people have very healthy mitochondria. They're not exposed to any of the triggers in our modern world. They have stable blood sugar, low inflammation, good stress management, and they are the ones that get through perimenopause and menopause the best.
Is that also including, and that's, I'm thinking, when you say menopause symptoms, we're thinking about mostly hot flashes, mood swings, and disruptive sleep. But what about all the other stuff that happens under the hood in terms of the bone loss and the cardiovascular disease and brain issues? Is that also these tribes? Because I imagine if you're a tribe, you probably have a lot of stress that an animal is going to eat you. You know what I mean? There's other stressors. It's not like they don't get stuck in traffic kind of stress, but they have the scorpion that's going to bite them at night kind of stress.
They have acute stress for sure. I think they have a lot less chronic stress. I mean, one would have to see whether a tribal woman actually even thinks about being bit by a scorpion on a constant level. I would assume they probably don't, because otherwise they would be much less healthy. So it's probably also about, I don't know, something about being in the tribe and just accepting possibly that some dangers are there without constantly worrying about it. So what we see that all of these chronic civilization disease issues that you just described that are happening to us when we lose the shield of estrogen at a much higher rate do not really occur as much in those ancient tribes. They don't, because they have this metabolic resistance, this low-grade inflammation. They probably also, and that I don't know, I need to see if that research has even been done, but I would assume that in menopause, they probably settle at a higher baseline level of estrogen and progesterone than we are. I would assume that they wouldn't plummet as much.
Now I want to know. I'm going to go find that.
So this is something we'd have to research, but it's very interesting that all of this stuff is not as present as much. So it seems in these healthy tribes, and you really have to find the ones that still eat original diet, are not exposed to toxins. So these are also hard to find these days, right? Because Coca-Cola is now in the highest mountain village and it's really getting into the deepest desert. And it's really like our crappy stuff is all around now. So it's going to be harder to find. But really today, you said that some people might not have a strong warning signal and they're still really sick inside, bone loss and so on. That is one factor. But in this ancient tribes, I really think it's not just that they don't have the warning signal. They really don't have these underlying inflammation and degeneration, bone loss as much as we do, because they still have this metabolic resilience. They have low inflammation. They have all the micronutrients. They have all the macronutrients. They have everything they need to stay healthy until a high age. If they live this like really original lifestyle. Yes, they might be bitten by a scorpion and die prematurely. So they might have, I don't know, a bacterial infection and die of that prematurely as well. So they don't have no of the modern medicine, but they also tend not to have this civilization diseases. And the best way to look at it is look at animals. Look at an animal in a zoo and an animal in the wild. Monkeys in the zoo get diabetes. They get heart disease. They're eating our crappy food stuff, right? Look at cats and dogs. Cats and dogs get cancer. They get all the stuff that we get. We feed them a crappy processed diet. An animal like that in the wild does not get cancer. They just don't. I really think that a lot of the symptoms, this chronic civilization things that we don't find in the wild, they're not genetic. They're environmental.
Let's go back to the hormone thing, because I've got some women in our community. Well, one of them I'm thinking in particular, she was having migraines, and a migraine was triggered every time she was using her estradiol, her vaginal estradiol, even on top of that. It wasn't even localized. It wasn't even systemic. So but she was taking it several times a week, not consistently. And then the moment she started to take it consistently, the migraines went away. So what is is HRT or done consistently, or is there some way to be taking HRT? First of all, is it helpful with the migraines for women going through perimenopause and menopause? And two, how should they be dosing it in terms of lowering that migraine?
So I think we have to distinguish between HRT, like what are we replacing? Are we using bioidentical hormones or are we using artificial hormones? And then we have to talk about physiological ideal levels. So let's start with the first question. Now, from my personal experience, I can pull one story, which is basically that I was always hypothyroid and my doctors prescribed me thyroid medication and it would trigger a migraine reliably on the smallest of doses after 20 minutes every time. And I thought, so strange. I'm thyroid deficient. I can't take it. What's going on? Only later, like a decade later, when I started to get into this field, I realized that they're giving me artificial hormones that have nothing to do with the chemical structure of what is made in our own body. And migraine, being a warning signal, was recognizing this. We're like, what the fuck is this? I don't want this in my body. This doesn't belong here. So whatever you want to do in migraine, it better be bioidentical. And this applies to all the supplements, anything that you put into your body, right? It has to be in a version the body can make and use. Otherwise, it will warn you. And this is another thing I can tell you about taking iron supplements. I'm always low iron, low ferritin. I used to get like free iron supplements or cast iron pan or even infusion. And migraine, the worst ever migraine would be triggered in like 20, 30 minutes without fail. This means like migraine triggers are never this like obvious. So this means this is really tremendously bad for me. Why? Now I know free iron, the iron supplements they give us, iron doesn't exist in free form much in the body because it's the most pro-oxidative stressor that you can have. Free iron liberates these bombs on a massive scale. In the body, iron is bound safely by ferritin. So if you take free iron supplements, it's going to be very bad for you. Not everybody gets migraine to warn them, but this will elevate oxidative stress. So now I have resorted to save iron supplements that are bound to something. If it's bound, it's not reacting, right? So migraine being a very useful warning signal that all of this stuff is not good for me. Now, I then eventually discovered bioidentical thyroid medication and it didn't trigger a migraine even once and I feel better and I can take them in fairly high doses, not a problem. So the same goes for estrogen, progesterone. There are products out there that sound very similar and this is always this, I don't know, you can't call it a scam, but this is the problem, right, with modern medicine. They call it a very similar word, progesterone or whatever it may be in your language that sounds really much like the real thing, but it's not. So this is very important that you work with a bioidentical hormone specialist when you do HRT. HRT done with artificial hormones probably going to make you worse. Why? The same as when I was on the pill, which was my migraine trigger. The pill has artificial versions of these hormones. Now they're going to replace the real thing. And they are similar enough. And in the body, hormones mostly work with negative feedback loop. What does that mean? So if we have artificial hormones of a certain height, your body thinks, oh, now we have enough estrogen. I'm going to give a negative feedback to your own production. Now the body will start to make less of the real thing because it thinks it has enough of the hormone already present, but it's structurally changed so it can't perform all the actions of the real thing. So that's like the worst thing that can happen. And now I have brittle bones and all the stuff that you get in perimenopause because I've been using that really artificial hormones for like 13 years without knowing, right? So this is one thing I really want women to know. And once you know it, you can't unlearn it, right? Once you understand, you can't forget it. So that's why understanding, I think, is so important. Everything has to be bioidentical to really have the function that you want it to do. And now comes the other concept. Hormones can be too much of a good thing is a bad thing. You can have too little hormones. You can have too much hormones. Both are harmful and your migraine will warn you. So with hormones, it's important that you work with somebody who can establish the ideal physiological range for your age and for your body. This can differ, right? And then how you feel will tell you, are you above or below potentially? So yes, estrogen, Ideally, bioidentical estrogen through the skin, and potentially sometimes it must be combined with progesterone because also, and this makes it even more complicated, there needs to be a balance between different things. So you don't want to just give one very high. And that is also with my own product, Brain Ritual, why you find so many different ingredients in there is because you don't want to give chronically magnesium over time without controlling calcium, because these will impact each other and absorption. You might be low on the other after some time, or isolated nutrients or hormones over a long time, probably not a good idea. So always checking, is your progesterone now in control? Do you need to take progesterone also that can usually be taken orally? And now the other thing with hormones is hormones you need to take like clockwork. It's not like a magnesium or like an electrolyte that you can take or you cannot take, or maybe you take vitamin D one day and then another and it's stored. Hormones, your body's function is reliant on, and it adapts to having those hormones. Now, if you don't have thyroid hormones in the morning, you're not going to wake up properly. Your whole metabolism will crash. So what you said about that one patient, she's sometimes taking estrogen, sometimes not taking estrogen. This is terrible for the body. You need to take that as a fairly consistent time and very consistently every day, because your body will adapt its own production to what you take exogenously, because there is this negative feedback loop and the body is very smart in anticipating what will come, how much do I have to make, and so on. So you really need to be consistent here. Ideally, similar timing, but also really taking it every day, taking it with you. And just saying all these things, I'm realizing I need to say, I'm a scientist, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a PhD. None of this is medical advice, right? Please check with your doctor before you change or do anything, product, diet, whatever. Just want to put that out there, and we might put it in the show notes. But if I were that person, then yes, check progesterone, take it together, and check that it's in a physiological range. Too much estrogen is also not a good thing. Too little estrogen is bad. And being out of balance with progesterone is also a bad thing. So these two need to be in tandem, potentially with other hormones. So also for females, I encourage them check testosterone. Testosterone is also essential for females. Take the precursors, DHEA, pregnenolone. There's other hormones that could also be out of whack that also need to be taken into account in like a comprehensive HRT protocol. If you get that right, then I think it should be migraine protective. And as you said, when she's taking it regularly, the migraine goes away. Migraine is warning you. If you take it here and there, it's telling you this is not right. Watch out, something's wrong. So whenever you get a migraine, you have to look at your protocol. And with a very high certainty, there's something off. And once you know, you can also recognize that and find the root cause for why the migraine is being turned on.
It's interesting because, yeah, most people say, I just give up. That's it. Not for me. My migraines are too much. And then you get scared every time you use your estrogen. Oh my God, am I going to get a migraine? But this was more about quality and consistency. And you wouldn't even think about that if you're not working with a menopause doctor or somebody who understands migraines. Like you said, is your alarm system, it will tell you. Now, okay, you've dedicated your life to studying migraines and you've published even research into some of the most prestigious journals. So what are the top 3 most effective protocols to stop or prevent migraines?
Yeah, so I've developed 4 to 5 pillar models. So it's not 3, it's 4 to 5 that I would recommend or that I have used on myself. And I see a lot of success with people trying. One last word before I go into this, that HRT does not fix underlying metabolic issues, right? So this is why these 4 or 5 pillars come into the picture. So the first pillar, in very brief, is you need to stabilize blood glucose. Your brain is entirely dependent on the rest of the body to supply it with energy. Why? It's surrounded by the skull, right? It can't really store energy. There's no space. It's protected by the blood-brain barrier. So only a couple of small molecules that are energy dense are making it into the brain. So that means we need to supply it with energy at all times. It does need glucose. So that involves a low glycemic index diet. So no processed or easy carbs like sugar or highly processed carbohydrates. That involves sleep hygiene. If your sleep is out of whack, you're stressed. Stress will increase blood glucose or do a roller coaster. That involves things you don't think of, like allergies. Allergies will increase stress hormones and will have your blood sugar, food allergies or other allergies fluctuate. That involves stress control because stress also will impact how your blood sugar behaves. The second pillar is micronutrients. Now, I've already learned that you need to put fuel in the tank, ideally the right fuel. So we'll come to that. But for your car engine to work properly, you also need the water and the oil and other things that are supporting the petrol in the tank. And this is where your antioxidants come in, where your micronutrients come in, such as trace minerals, so important for energy production. It's not in our waters anymore. It's not in the soil anymore. So we really have to watch out here. Electrolytes, especially in the US. If you drink filtered waters, at least you don't have the toxins, but you also have dead water. There's no electrolytes in it, so watch out for electrolytes. This is your methylated B vitamins. This is your vitamin D, E, A, all of these things. And this is also micronutrients involves hormones. So this would also be checking for thyroid, female hormones, testosterone, and so on. So this is like your supplementation protocol. This can be done by high quality and stressed bioavailable micronutrients or hormones if needed, as well as a whole foods diet wherever possible. Just get not the processed stuff, organic if you can. Third pillar is reducing oxidative stress and increasing antioxidant capacity. This is really where you have to control the bombs, the free radical bombs that are destroying your powerhouses, that are destroying your DNA, that are causing inflammation. And this can be done via several different things. Now, this would be pacing, really not exercising or spending more energy than you have. And this is very hard for me. I always overpace and do more than I actually can. Listening to your body. This is controlling toxins on a chemical level. So kicking out all your cleaning products, perfume, really looking for organic solutions wherever possible, or making your own stuff. I know that sounds daunting, but really looking into your food quality, your water, the air you breathe. This involves physical stress, over-exercising, or even if you have a migraine, you might not be able to, at this moment, exercise at all. Exercise was my most potent migraine trigger. This involves psychological stress, learning to say no, not being a perfectionist, working on traumata, kicking out people that are toxic in your life. Just because you were friends in school doesn't mean they're still good for you right now. There's several psychological strategies here. And then increasing endogenous antioxidants, so bomb catching capacity. This would really be eating more sulfurous food, getting those thiol groups, taking CoQ10 and other antioxidants. You can take also exogenously, vitamin E, C, ketone bodies to really support your body's ability to neutralize those free radicals. And then pillar 4 really is adding an alternative energy source for the brain if none of that is working. And that could be ketone bodies. You can do that via a diet where you have a fasting mimicking diet, really reduce carbohydrates, moderate protein, increase healthy fats. As long as your liver is capable of doing that and is still working well, this can help. Or recently we have the opportunity to use more exogenous sources of ketone bodies. Again, I would prefer human identical bioavailable versions of ketone bodies so your liver isn't struggling. And then the 5th pillar, if you want, is other ways to support mitochondrial functioning. And that would be sauna, heat stress where you can, cold stress, all in your hermetic window, in the window where you can grow. This would also involve blue blocker glasses or going for a walk, all of these things that are further helping your mitochondria stay healthy. Now, this is the 5-pillar migraine mastering model. And it's really a model to master metabolism, to be honest.
Wow. Okay. Control our blood glucose is number one. 2, imagine it lowering, micronutrients, which include hormones and electrolytes and antioxidants.
Stuff.
Yeah. 3, lower oxidative stress. And 4, improve your energy intake. And
alternative energy source, ketosis, if you need it, right? If the other pillars haven't worked.
And the 5th one, it sounds like all the biohacking tools, like
exactly
all the cool stuff. So this is all in your upcoming book, isn't it?
All of this is in my upcoming book. It's everything I learned in over a decade. It's really taken me a decade to write, of personal suffering, studying neuroscience, PhD in clinical research, and running a company and being on conferences with the top experts for over a decade. It's about what is a migraine and how is it a metabolic disease or partially metabolic disease, rediscovering that ancient fuel, the ketone bodies that we haven't had much chance to talk about, but that's a more effective fuel source for the brain and also a potent antioxidant. And then it's about these 5 pillars and really practical tips, including the labs, including everything that I would have wanted to know to take my health into my own hand with help of functional medicine doctors or practitioners, of course. All in one book, launching at $2.99. I'm really almost giving this away for free with half a coffee, so everybody hopefully can afford it. So yeah, please, we have a link in the show notes. Go there if this sounds helpful, or recommend it to a friend whose life is debilitating by this disease. Everything I've said today hopefully gives hope. Migraine is the condition that the beautiful part is that if you restore brain energy through these metabolic interventions, then we can really, or many people can really break the cycle. if you're just masking the symptoms, you're not fixing the root problem. And that's what I'm so passionate about, is really restoring energy, restoring functioning, and helping people regain control of their life and not being just, yeah, crippled by migraine and the loss of control that can bring. And the loss of life, right? It's the presence of pain that is so bad. But what is even worse is that you're missing out on precious life moments that will never come back. All the school trips that I've missed, the school, the birthday parties, the being a teenager, all of that is gone, right? But at least I can now enjoy my adult life a bit more.
Hopefully, this has helped anyone who's been listening now with their migraines, or you're going to get on the fast track to getting rid of them. And please share this episode if you can with somebody who can find it useful. But I have so many questions, honestly, and we almost need a part two because I have to run and you have to run. Because I do want to talk to you about some of these strategies to activate our own endogenous ketones through fasting. And again, the question kind of is, oh, if you got thyroid issues and cortisol, like adding fasting and the exercise, like all of this stuff could be too stressful.
Do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what about, so before we go, I know you've got an amazing product called Brain Ritual, and thank God you have this right on the screen. I can remember it right in front of you. If you're on YouTube, you see it. So this, I imagine it's got some of the ketone bodies I would love to take a deep dive into ketone bodies with you, but at another time, but minerals and all the things that you talked about. In addition to all the lifestyle and practices, this is the caveat. This is not just a quick fix, but it certainly can help with the migraine. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Brain Ritual has basically been developed as a tool because once you're crippled with chronic migraine or energy deficiency, it's really just so hard to even change your life on all fronts, right? And it can feel really overwhelming. So Brain Ritual is actually a medical food. That's something between a supplement and a drug. A supplement is always for healthy people. This has been developed against a disease or for the dietary management of a disease. And as you rightly said, it has like over 35 bioactive ingredients that support energy metabolism in addition to a hopefully healthy lifestyle that we just discussed. But it can really help you get started. It has the ketone bodies in it as a star ingredient because the ketone bodies can really circumnavigate a lot of problems that we see with glucose metabolism in migraine or other metabolic dysfunction that reduces oxidative stress as a very potent energy source, can make more ATP per oxygen molecule consumed. So it's really that alternative powerful energy substrate. And then because it's a one-stop energy metabolism shop, we have put inside a lot of other migraine protective ingredients and simply ingredients that support energy metabolism and reduce oxidative stress. So really help us with the 5 pillars. So that's your trace minerals that a lot of waters are deprived of. That's your electrolytes. It's your methylated B vitamins. So if you have this MTHFR mutation, that's fine for that as well. It has functional sugars for DNA repair, ribose. It has allulose to reduce blood sugar. It has other vitamins, the fat soluble, the water soluble ones. It has L-carnitine to shuttle fatty acid inside of the mitochondria. It has taurine for liver support. It has other amino acids. It's really like a one-stop migraine managing shop, we say, or a mastering metabolism shop that is supposed to be used daily for at least the first months to get started. So it can take up to 3 months before you notice the difference. Some notice the first sachet. Some really take a couple of months to adapt, fill nutrient reserves, depending on how sick you are. That's all put into little sachets, or actually quite big sachets, 16 grams, because your brain needs a lot of fuel. And you take that once or twice a day. It's important to ease into it because the nutrient load is really high. So you can get GI upset or a bit of diarrhea if you dose it up too quickly. So we recommend starting with half a sachet and then working your way up all the way to 2 a day if you're more severely affected. And Zora and Hegio H will be also having a discount code for you. So there will be a link if you're interested to try. You can click that on the bottom, and it's brainritual.com/hackmyh for a $30 discount. For trying.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes, as well as the book, How to Master Migraine. And for anyone listening who's suffering with migraines, whether it's once a month or once an hour, can they ever become completely migraine free?
Well, we have had several examples, even with just mainly the product, right? Just taking sachets every day that are almost migraine free, like even chronic severe cases. We have people reaching out that have just done my lifestyle protocols that are migraine free. But honestly, you will never be completely migraine free, and that is a good thing. You have that warning system inbuilt. And even me, If I now do it wrong, if I take free iron supplements or I don't sleep and I overwork and I do everything wrong, I still get a migraine. I'm very grateful for it because it still warns me. So what you get absolutely is possible for many people. And I don't want to say everyone because nothing is for everyone. If you have hormone deficiencies, you need to address that. There's different root causes for migraine, as we know, right? But fixing and improving metabolism can really help you get back in control of your life. And really, if you have the occasional migraine, then a painkiller and the triptan is okay to use as well. But really not having this warning signal be a daily occurrence, that's the goal. And there's absolutely hope that you can get your life back and back in the driver's seat of your life, let's say.
There's hope. Yay. Thank you so much,
There is
Dr.
a
Elena.
lot of hope for sure.
There's
There's
so
a
much
lot of
we can
hope.
do. Some may take some work, but you've got brain ritual on your side on top of everything else that you do.
It
And
will take some work, but there's so much support material out there now. Everything that I would have wished to have 2 decades ago is now in the book. There's free resources. I have a migraine mastering course that you can take, 9 sessions that really explains everything we've talked about today in a bit more detail with practical takeaways. There's a free migraine mastering guide that you can download on the website that has absolutely no cost and is 9 pages of going through all the things we've talked here now. So there's a lot of free resources that you can use already to get started, and baby steps, tiny habits, one day at a time. If you fall out of from the wagon, don't worry, just get back on it straight away. Yeah, so you can absolutely do it. If I could have done it without any support and resources, you can absolutely do it today.
I love it.
100%.
Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, they can also find you on Instagram, Dr. Elena Gross, and I'll have links to many ways that people can connect with you and find out more. There is hope. We can change. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
one last word would be your brain isn't broken, it's probably starving.
That's a good quote. Oh, that's a great reel clip right there. I love it. One of our community members asks about your opinion on mouth breathing, snoring, and sleep apnea. Are there any connections with migraines and these conditions?
Absolutely. There's 2 ways we can make energy in the body. There's the anaerobic and the aerobic way. The anaerobic one gives you like 4 ATP per molecule burned. The aerobic one, which means using oxygen, can get you up to 36 ATP. So there's a tremendously more effective way of making energy if you have oxygen available. Now, what you just said, sleep apnea and other conditions, and even weather, some people get migraines with weather, changes the oxygen availability. Without oxygen or with too little oxygen, your energy production will be inefficient. And inefficient and not enough ATP and energy, we already learned, can trigger migraine. So here's the connection with these conditions. Absolutely, the less oxygen, the more likely you are to get a migraine. And we know that even from clinical trials, if you put people at an altitude, even people without migraine get an altitude headache. At an altitude, you have less oxygen in the air. It's one of the most prominent migraine triggers right there.
Oh, great. Okay. So the women who are in my community biohacking menopause membership group, we teach them how to breathe. We teach them functional breathing. I've been certified through the Oxygen Advantage. And this is what we do. We teach people you can tape your mouth at night. You can practice functional breathing. And I didn't even realize I would love to do an experiment with our ladies who do have migraines and say, let's do these exercises and mouth tape and see what happens. And if your migraines improve. But that's the whole premise behind this type of breathing, is to bring more oxygen into the bloodstream and into the cells.
Absolutely. Very important. And there's even 100% oxygen that you can buy in the pharmacy that you can breathe in. And in cluster headache, very related to migraine headache, it's the #1 therapy is breathing in 100% oxygen during the attack.
Wow. Okay. So you have the free version and the paid easy version. It's much easier to
Or you could do both, right? I mean,
Or
what
both.
I've been trying is, Wim Hof breathing, and you actually breathe in 100% oxygen while you do the breath exercise. I'm not recommending that to anyone, but I've been trying that. So yeah, it's maybe worth experimenting with.
So cool. Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who's listened to the end. There's so much more that I wanted to ask Dr. Elena, and there's so much more behind this episode. So please go check her out. You can be migraine free. Share this episode with your friends. And thank you so much for your time and hanging out with me and Dr. Gross. And thank you, Dr. Elena Gross, for your time as well. And we'll see you next time.
I loved it. Thank you all, and see you soon.